Well, hi guys. Welcome to our very first collaborating event and remote event for IxDA and Experience Makers. I'm Poppy Guthrie, the co-founder and co-leader of IxDA Indy, and my co-organizer is Chelsea Kaysen. I work as a senior interaction designer at SEP with Chelsea, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Chelsea, just like Poppy said. I am an interaction designer at SCP as well, and co-hosting IxDA, and just really excited to get to know the community and see how we can connect together and learn some things from some of our pros here on the panel.
Then Justin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sounds good. Hey everyone, I am Justin Zalewski. I'm Director of Product Design at Studio Science. Myself, Tom Basamba, and Evan Strader are the organizers of Experience Makers, and we are happy to be co-hosting this remote event with the IxDA. It's our first remote event that we're doing together, so we're excited to experiment and see how this works and to interact with you all. We've got a really great group of panelists. I'll let Evan and Tamba introduce themselves before we toss it back over to Poppy to kick us into the panel. Evan, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Evan Strader, as Justin mentioned, a co-organizer for Experience Makers. I am a product designer at Studio Science on our digital product team, and I've been there for a number of years now. Tamba, do you want to give a quick intro as well?
Yeah. Hey everybody, my name is Tom Basamba. I'm Principal UX Designer at Angie's List. This is my first year helping out with this group and excited to meet all of you in the community and to help move things forward.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Over to you, Poppy.
All right, so we have 4 panelists with us today. Hopefully you read a little bit about them in the invite. And we'll go ahead and start with Dave Hora. Why don't you give us an introduction about yourself and then go ahead and pass it to one of the other panelists when you're done.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave. I'm a researcher currently based in Berlin. I've been here almost a year now, but spent about 9 years working in the San Francisco area and then a year consulting on my own in Denver. Right now, my company ResearchGate has shifted to full remote, and it's actually quite a big challenge for a lot of the folks who haven't worked remotely before. Personally, I spent my year of consulting doing an entirely remote research practice, so it's personally less of an issue, but interesting to see the tension for people who have worked in this environment before. Yeah, that's enough. Jackie, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Jacquelyn Halpern. I'm based here in Indianapolis, and I'm a senior product designer at an awesome company called DockYard, where we are all remote. But I've also had almost 3 years of remote working experience prior to this too. Oh, me now, Austin.
Hey, I'm Austin Woodall. I'm a product engineer at Studio Science, going on about 4 years now. I currently work partially remote, so I spend about half my time at the Studio Science office here in Indianapolis, and then the rest of my time working from home. And lastly, I think we have Anna.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Anna Saraceno. I am a senior product designer at Trello, which is part of Atlassian, which also makes Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket. And I have been working remotely coming up on 2 years now. Trello, since the beginning, has been a almost fully remote company, and we're in kind of an interesting spot now because the rest of the Atlassian workforce has shifted from being mostly in offices to being mostly remote like Trello. So we're in kind of an interesting spot now as well.
Thank you guys for joining us today. Some housekeeping for all of the attendees. If you, there should be a Q&A button somewhere on your screen. If you have a question that you want us to ask the panelists, just submit it there, and Evan is going to moderate those, and then you'll have a chance to hopefully get those answered as we roll on. So why don't we start with just talking about what does collaboration look like in a remote setting? And what are some ways that you explore different phases, what that looks like, and we'll keep it pretty open-ended. Does anyone want to field this first?
I can start things off, sure. So I would say, the first piece of advice is over communication. In a co-located setting, it's so easy to get clarification just by going over and talking to somebody. But with remote collaboration, you have to be really thoughtful about making the most of the time that you spend together, in person, like on Zoom calls like this, and what you're doing async. So you need to be really thoughtful about, if you are collaborating, if you are kind of, in exploratory phases for design concepts, if you're planning some sort of collaboration, brainstorming, what that looks like for me usually isn't just, let's get something on the calendar for brainstorming. It's, let's do this homework up front before we come to the session. Let's set this agenda, be prepared to do X, Y, Z, so that when we actually all get on the Zoom call, we have a common understanding of what we're going to be doing. A lot of times I like to set a meeting agenda and have everybody kind of agree on it, and we agree on, this meeting will be successful if X, Y, Z, and have everybody agree on it ahead of time. This is all just good practice in general for collaborating with other people, but I think that it's extra important in a remote setting to level set, just because there's that kind of extra factor of not being on the same page because you're in a remote setting. So that's why I say just kind of over communication, making sure that people set an agenda and do homework before meetings and get-togethers as well. That's kind of where I would start off with this question.
Dave, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I guess I really like the comment that, it's about taking your good practices and doing them remote. And that's maybe the thread that I keep thinking of when I think about this. It's important to really figure out which pieces you need to have working well and do them especially well in remote. And that'll change team by team. If you're working with a small, tight-knit team, it's enough where you can just be chatting and slacking and calling up each other on a Slack call, a Zoom call, even the phone, pretty ad hoc. But the moment that team gets a little bit larger, then you really need to be rigorous and set clear expectations. And I think it's knowing those good practices and then agreeing together on how you want to work together with these remote challenges. That's really important to get things started.
I'm wondering, from a collaboration perspective between, as a developer, Austin, how you remotely collaborate with designers and what that collaboration looks like.
Yeah, it definitely can be tricky, especially as we're getting into that initial development phase where I'm starting to dig through all those designs and kind of figure out what are the questions that I need to ask. And as Anna said, it's gathering up all those questions and trying to find a good time to get all those answers in one call, right? Because it can be hard to sync up your calendars if I'm constantly trying to hey, can I call you to answer this one question? And then a couple hours later, hey, I have another question. So again, being very mindful of everyone's time, getting those agendas created, and making the most of your time.
Jackie, I'm wondering, since you have a lot of agency experience in a remote setting, what does collaboration with your clients look like in a remote fashion?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question, because as I was thinking, it looks it looks different for us internally, and then it is a little different with clients. I think sometimes it depends. So, for example, and probably because our engagement was so long with Netflix, our collaboration with them also we got it to a point where the relationship felt like we could collaborate internally. So, for example, we were direct communication with them in Slack. So if we had a question that was directly for them, we could just take a screenshot, send it in Slack, and they were super responsive that way. So we got a lot of that ad hoc. But it is a little different and a little trickier when that relationship isn't built, like especially in the beginning. And so a lot of that does more look like planning these workshop sessions and planning the agenda and making sure everyone understands the outcomes and the goals. But kind of just touching on what Anna said, it's when you're running those types of initial workshops, it's really important to have that agenda and make sure that everyone's on the same page, especially if you're collaborating with people who haven't necessarily done workshops or ideation sessions or aren't used to that type of stuff. But otherwise, internally, it's a little easier. And on-sites, I think, are also really important. Like actually being able to meet them in person.
So in this current climate, does anyone on the panel have experience having to set up some kind of relationship building with people completely remote, never meeting them in person, no option for on-site? What does that look like? Maybe Dave, do you have experience with that?
Yeah, I guess I have recent experience. We booted up a new project stream that started the day after everybody went remote. And it's 6 different groups of people, each like 2 to 5, working on different work streams. Fortunately, everyone knew each other already. And I think if they didn't, this is where we'd really need to figure out what the right activities are to build that set of shared understanding, like the human understanding first that you would just normally get over time with face-to-face experience. The thing that we've done, I guess, with this newer collaborative remote effort is set the clear expectations up front and treat everything that we're doing as an experiment that anybody at any time can sort of comment on and say, hey, this isn't really working. So we've done, in this case, it's not too different than your daily stand-up, but we've called it a daily briefing and tried to treat it sort of like, if you've read Team of Teams, I like his metaphors of like creating shared situational awareness. That's how I've been pitching to the team, and the way that we're working is we need to come together and spend more time than you would think you want for everyone to go through what they're doing so that you create a shared understanding of where everyone else is at. Since what you miss the most in remote work are those normal ad hoc connections that would happen when people are walking around. Yeah, okay, I've lost track of the initial question now that I tangented a bit. So I'll return it to you.
No, that was great. It kind of touches on another topic we wanted to reach into, which is how do you facilitate that personal connection? How do you translate in a remote setting things that you lose when you're face to face? And so maybe setting status, setting availability, creating those opportunities for connection. What does that look like?
I'll go ahead real quick. In terms of setting status, we rely on Slack a lot for just like minimal status setting. Like there's a Google Calendar integration that hooks into your Google Calendar, and it will show a calendar icon for your status whenever you're in a meeting. So if you're about to message someone, you can see like, oh, they're in a meeting, I won't bug them right now. We have a little target icon that we'll use if we're focused right now. So, look and say, oh, they're focusing on something, I won't bug them right now. So people are usually, pretty respectful of that. And then in terms of just kind of like the ad hoc feedback, we're pretty good at making ourselves available for like, hey, I'm working on this thing. Can like do a couple people have 10 or 15 minutes to jump on Zoom, jump into this Figma document and collaborate with me. So it's, it's usually reaching out to say like who is available right now rather than trying to bug someone who isn't available.
That's interesting too, because a lot of times when we set up meetings, if you're used to being face to face, it's always default half hour or an hour. Do you find yourself setting like 15-minute meetings or 10-minute just chats, shorter time spans?
Yeah, definitely. We very much try to be respectful of people's free time, and especially when it's kind of more of an ad hoc meeting. We try to keep it, as short as it really needs to be. And then I think, part of being a good remote colleague means being willing to jump in when other people need you. Like, you need to be protective of your own heads down time when you're outside of meetings, but you also need to be cognizant of the fact that if you were in an office, like, you would be talking to other people when they need to talk to you. So you need to be willing to, sometimes jump into Slack and respond to people when they need you, even if you aren't scheduled to do that.
Do you have something to add, Jackie, on remote meetings and what the shape of ad hoc work might look like?
Sure. So like Anna mentioned, at DockYard, everyone's pretty respectful of everyone's time. I think we also rely on every individual to kind of own that time and protect it. So we expect that if you need to disappear, it's just communicated. So there's a lot of like transparency and openness around it. We have, if a project is going on, we have reoccurring specific meetings. We use Google Hangouts. We always try to have our video on usually. Sometimes some people don't, but I think the video really helps with meetings too, being able to see faces. And then if it's just some ad hoc stuff, we usually just message someone in Slack, ask when they're available, and then it's just a Slack call. We share screens and then use the drawing. And we do a lot of that for paired designing or paired working with UXD or engineering. Otherwise, we also have, because we have people in a ton of different time zones and outside of the US, we have like a company standard of like, depending on what time zone you're in, we ask that you're available between these hours. And then, at least for me, I have specific times on my calendar that I will block to be like a do not disturb. But it's also communicated that like, hey, that's my quiet time, or that's my lunchtime or reflection time. But if you need me, then I can shift it. So it's kind of just a give and take.
Austin and Dave, I'm wondering, how does this change if some people are remote and some people are on site?
I can start. Oh, you start.
No, go ahead.
Okay. A change, or at least one of the difficult dynamics we see when some people are on site and some people are remote, is that the person who is remote misses the ability to gather the body language and to signal and cue. For example, when they would like to start talking in a conversation. And like just our example of like who's going to start. If we were sitting next to each other, it would be a lot easier to do that. It's hard full remote, and it's even worse for the people who are remote when you're partial remote, partial on site. So in past times where we've worked like this and we have that situation, some of my companies that I've been at have decided that remote always gets the question first, and they have the option to pass, but it's very easy to discuss something around the room, and the remote person's never sure when to jump in or how. So I think that one of the big things to be aware of is the difference in dynamics that people are experiencing and the context that the remote person may not have when they're trying to participate.
That's a good point, Dave. And I could have made it easier by picking one of you instead of both. So now, Austin, can you add to that?
Yeah. Again, so being kind of 50-50 on-site and remote. Typically, when I go remote, that is kind of my alone time, right? That is my blocked off, heads down working. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to figure out if I need assistance from like a designer or I need feedback from someone. Um, it's easy to just look across the office and say, oh, they're not busy. We can take a quick 5-minute discussion. But with one being on site, one being remote, it's more like I try to check their calendars, check their Slack status, make sure that they have nothing going on, and then, ask them politely through Slack or something like, hey, do you have a moment? Can we schedule something out? So things aren't as real-time feedback. It's about just being very conscious of their schedule and then yours as well. So
I wanted to add to what Dave was saying. He shared a really good practice for when some people are together in an office and when some people are remote. One of my favorite things about our remote culture at Trello is basically assuming that everybody is remote. We do have a headquarters in New York City, and maybe, 20% of our workforce works out of there, and everyone else is remote. And our policy is that if we have a meeting with any remote person in it, then everybody in the meeting has to be remote. So if there's 5 people in the meeting and 3 of them are in the New York office and 2 of them are remote, then all 3 people in the New York office have to take the meeting from different locations in the New York office and join the Zoom call. And that really makes all the difference in the world, because I think we all know how it feels if, I'm one of few people joining a meeting remotely, and there's a bunch of people in a room together. It's like, kind of like jumping into a double Dutch, like jump rope, like you don't know how to jump in because there's people together in a room. So I really like that policy a lot.
Yeah, that seems like it would help a lot of that awkwardness or exclusion, like in-group, out-group, that can happen with any kind of mixed scenario, really. Yeah. So let's transition into, what does the work actually look like? So we've talked a lot about collaboration, and we have a few types of workers represented here. So we have research with Dave, development with Austin, and digital and print design with Anna and Jackie. So wanting to know, how does that change? How does the actual practice of the work change in a remote setting? Why don't we start with Jackie? Sorry.
Oh, you cut out. I was like, I hope she didn't say my name. So I mean, it is a little different, and I think it goes back to the collaboration aspect. Or wait, what was the original question?
Just what the actual work looks like in a remote setting for maybe even different phases and types of.
Sure. So I mean, I will say it is a lot different, because if you are someone who, engages in the, say, discovery phase or the research type, or where you need user interviews and stakeholder interviews, traditionally it is a lot easier to have those done in person, where you get the body language, you build more of a rapport, you get more of that empathy, being face to face. So for us, it kind of just circles back to some of the collaboration stuff. Like I said, in the beginning, we try, if we can, we really want to make that first initial kickoff or visit in person. So we try for the on-site for that initial meeting or kickoff or big discovery phases. If we can't, then we try our best. Sometimes there's a bit of a learning curve for the client, like I said, because most of the clients we work with are not fully remote. And tying back into what Anna said, sometimes that can be a downfall, because they are all gathered in one room, in one webcam, and we are all separately, and we miss a lot of those things that happen off camera, or things we can't see, or minor discussions. But otherwise, as far as tools go, we use Google Hangouts. So we set up our meetings via Google Hangouts with video. If we want it to be a recorded session, we'll use Zoom. And then we're trying out different tools. So we've been really using Figma, and we're trying it out with some like ideation and collaborative sessions. So being able to use it for, say, in replace of post-it notes, and we have dot voting, that type of stuff. So it's a little different than in person, but you can still collaborate. Sometimes we'll use InVision freehand, do some sketches, or we'll sketch on an iPad or like a different tablet and put it in or hold it up. So I think it's just getting used to it, but I guess it's kind of how it looks different for me.
Dave, do you have something to add about how the shape of your work takes in a remote setting?
Yeah, I guess at least from the research perspective, two pieces where it's particularly interesting are debriefing and then figuring out how to do shared sense making. And I think it's very easy when we're all in the same room to get a lot more from an interview and to keep stakeholders there, the people who are participating in interviews after the fact, to actually have that discussion about what we've seen, what's important, and what's meaningful for us. And this was sort of surprising to me, but it's something as simple as having a calendar invite after your research interview to sit down and talk about your research interview. Because the moment an interview is over, you click end meeting for all to make sure the participant leaves so that they don't rejoin a room where you're talking about what you just saw with them. And then, though, you end that interview and your interviewer goes off and joins some other meeting or forgets about it, your observer. So finding that for doing the research, you need to be a lot more explicit about what time involvement is for them and where that actually happens. It's like, we're going to interview the person in this room, and then we're going to meet in this room afterwards to talk about it. So a weird little thing, just again, being deliberate about where you meet. And having tools to make sense of interview data, like, very difficult, having the time to do that. We've been taking observations, pulling them from spreadsheets and notes into a Miro or a Mural, and doing sessions in Miro and Mural with either audio or video. And that's the closest we've gotten to real life fidelity. It's actually really powerful in those tools because you can see other people's mouths. And at some point, I'd say sort of like an implicit language develops where they can be discussing, their mouse moves around in certain ways, and it's almost as if they were pointing at those things. So I guess the important point there is that we're trying to reach that higher fidelity of discussion and conversation we can have where people can point at things and move ideas around. It's hard.
Yeah, I can understand that. Anna, do you have something to add on this?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of how the actual work looks different in a remote setting, a lot of it is trying to recreate the collaborative whiteboard setting, and you all have mentioned a lot of it. We do a lot of collaboration in Mural, using digital stickies. You have to be willing to kind of sit on a Zoom call for a while with your colleagues and find creative ways to brainstorm. We do similar things to what Jackie was saying about, you might do your own sketching and then just hold it up to the camera. I mean, I've done things in brainstorming sessions where, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the brainstorming activity Crazy Eights, where you fold a paper into 8 quadrants and you brainstorm 8 different ideas for a solution. And, we'll do that remotely and then just like hold up our paper to the camera and share the ideas. So, just because you are communicating through a digital space doesn't mean you can't still use the physical tools that you would in person. It's just a matter of how you communicate them and share them out. But I would say that, one thing that became very obvious to me and one thing that I appreciate about Trello is that we are very intentional about taking time to be social and to make connections with our colleagues so that we have those relationships that enable us to better communicate and collaborate together. The Trello design team has a weekly half-hour meeting. It's just called Design Studio. It has a rotating facilitator, and when it's your week to facilitate, you can do anything you want. You can choose a topic to discuss. You can do one of those like online Jackbox games. One time when I did it, I had everyone do like MTV Cribs and give a tour of their house. So just like scheduling time to be social, which might sound awkward, but is really necessary because you're not going to do it otherwise, is really important. Every other week we have a meeting for everyone at Trello. It's a Trello town hall. And after we get through all of our business, we do, it's called Mr. Rogers, I think, because it's like, won't you be my neighbor? But in Zoom, you can like assign everyone in Zoom to random groups. So after that meeting, everyone gets assigned randomly to like a 4 or 5 person group. So then you spend the next half hour with like 4 or 5 people that you may or may not know, just chatting casually. So there are a lot of creative ways that you can use remotely to form those social connections that then help you collaborate and communicate when it comes time to do the actual work.
Nice. Austin, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that I think I might have to steal some of Anna's ideas because, again, working 50-50, right? It's like I get that social interaction, going to the office and talk with my coworkers, but now with that kind of full remote right now, I haven't really found great ways to make connection with my coworkers other than, the daily stand-ups and such. But yeah, integrate some kind of like activities or interactive experiences with my team. I think that would be great. So,
Jackie, do you guys have fun activities that you do to facilitate bonding remotely at DockYard?
Yeah. So for our company, so every year we have a company retreat where everybody in the entire company gets together in person for like 3 to 4 days, which ours just got postponed to August. It was supposed to be in May. And then each individual department has a secondary in-person retreat. So last year, the design team went to Austin and did a week of workshops with the Nelson Norman group. And before that, we went mountain biking in Colorado. And then as far as company-wide, we have DockYard Fridays, which are meant for all employees to not work on client work and to work on things internally for DockYard or self-growth or learning new skills. And that's also when we have a company-wide stand-up that's recorded via Zoom. We have a newsletter that goes out. We have a coffee house hour before that anybody can join. And then for us, we have our design meeting every Friday. We alternate who runs it. So whoever's running it gets to do whatever activity they want. And then during the week, I think on Wednesdays, we have a recurring design critique meeting that we all can join. And because we're all working on different projects now, so it's just an open space to get open feedback or talk about whatever. Or if sometimes we just get on and we all talk for an hour.
Cool. So I want to transition into more like work-life balance. So when you're working from home, and now we've shared the poll results, so you can see that 76% of people on the call right now are only remote because of the current landscape. So do you have any tips for people going through this for the first time on how to balance working from home with your personal life and making sure you stay sane? Let's start with Anna.
Oh, I don't know if I'm an expert at this. So I would say this is something that I'm always working on. I have 2 kids, 2 boys, ages 5 and 7, very energetic. One of the most difficult parts of the situation hasn't been the transition in work life because my work life hasn't changed much since I was remote already. But what has changed is that my very energetic school-age children are constantly home right now. My wife very nicely took them outside scootering while I'm in this webinar, so that's why it's quiet right now. But the hardest part of work-life balance for me is having dedicated work hours, especially when my kids are home. It's really hard for me to mentally transition from like, this is work and this is home life without me like leaving a building, commuting home and getting home to my family. I can be guilty of like taking my laptop from my desk and bringing it out to the kitchen or living room and just catching up on messages while I'm also interacting with my kids or something. So I would say the downside of remote work is that the lines between work and personal life are way too easy to get blurred, at least for me. But the upside to that is that, again, depending on maybe your employer and kind of the nature of your work, I have a lot more flexibility and availability to be there for really important parts of my family life. My kids have a lot of different appointments and needs, and because I don't have a commute or work far from my home, I am able to be there for them, whether I need to go to their school or take them to an appointment or have them home for a specific reason. Like, because I work remotely, I don't have the stress of like, I'm at my office at work, I can't do that. Or some positives, some negatives. I think a lot of it comes down to how disciplined you are about keeping that work-life balance.
Dave, do you have something to add?
I think something that I'm seeing my coworkers go through right now, which is interesting, is in this transition when you first work remotely, the way that you spend your time doing your work is quite different than when you're in an office. And in an office, no problem getting up, walking around, chatting with someone, getting a drink. And there's a weird sort of like guilt that I've seen some people have about, am I doing enough? Can people tell that I'm online? Can people tell that I'm here? And I think there's actually like a real chance to work much, much more than you would in terms of the actual work you get done while you're remote. And pace picks up a little too quickly at times. What I'm saying is you're probably less productive in the office, and then you try to overcorrect for the time you're spending remote. But you need to be really careful about that. Some of my coworkers over the last week and a half have said that they feel very productive, but also very, very exhausted and burnt out because of this. So we're trying to help set better expectations. Like, absolutely go outside and take walks like you would take your coffee walk after lunch. Absolutely take some time and just sit there and Slack with a coworker about whatever you want. We haven't solved this problem within our company, and it's actually sort of a thing that an ongoing task force is saying, how can we make sure that we set clear expectations for these people who are unfamiliar with the situation? So yeah, I'd say watch out for that squeeze and be attentive to how much you can really do and how often you actually need to be sitting at your computer and online.
Austin, do you have anything to add on this being partial, like 50-50?
Yeah. As Dave said, like being in the office I always feel like my time is very unstructured. It is very, you don't feel, like you said, you don't feel guilty getting up to get a snack or a drink, talking with your coworkers, because usually the conversations you're having are productive or related to work. Whereas, in the first year or two working remotely, you do have that like guilt of, well, maybe I'll go and start prepping for dinner that evening, and it's like, oh, I should really be working still. It's the 9 to 5, but ways that I combat that are usually running timers. Usually have setting 30 to an hour work blocks, and then taking 5-minute to 10-minute short breaks. That way, I stay on a work schedule, but then also you get back that time that you lose from, say, like traveling. Keeping that structure, I think, helps me, at least personally, to feel like I'm being productive in my work, but then also taking full advantage of, as Anna said, of spending more time with my kids who are now home 100% of the time, getting out and exercising more. Yeah, that has been very beneficial for me.
Jackie, do you have something to add about balancing the balance?
Sure. Yeah. So I feel like I feel like I'm extra lucky because for me, to work from home, I need a very creative environment, a very creative space, open. I like lots of sunlight. Um, so I'm very fortunate in a sense that the house that I'm currently in, I got to help design, and it was built particularly around knowing that I work from home. Um, so one thing I would say is that, make sure that wherever you're working, because I realize that a lot of people now don't have the luxury of having a space where they may feel creative, or they may not have a really good desk chair, which is actually really important for your back and for your health. Like, you may not notice it until um, you've been sitting in your kitchen chair all day because you don't have a home office. Other things, I used to set timers in the beginning when I started working remote, just because I can go super tunneled and super focused, and before I know it, I've been staring at my computer for 4 hours. But now I know my body pretty well because I've been doing this for almost 5 years. In the mornings, I have a routine. So I use specific apps that wake me up gently, and I can snooze them without looking at a screen time. So I don't have to actually look at my screen. I used to meditate. So during the snooze time, I would get up, sometimes go into my office right here and meditate for the snooze time, which was me just sitting on my mat. And then I have a dog. So having a dog, we have a routine where I'm getting outside, especially as it gets warmer. She gets to go on like 3 to 4 walks a day, which are just like 10 to 15-minute walks, but it gets me outside, it gets me moving. So I would just say, while you're having to work from home, like, make sure that your environment feels good. If your back is hurting, like, I figure out a different solution. Just make things to make you feel productive and feel good, and then just keep moving, get outside, meditate, and just listen to your body, I guess, and listen to your mental state, because this is new for a lot of you, I know, and it can be really hard and overwhelming. So I guess that's all I got.
Thanks, Jackie. So I want to now talk a lot about like what it's been like for you working remotely as a designer, as a researcher, as a developer with designers. How do you think post COVID-19, how do you think the work might change, or the expectations that you might have might change after the dust settles and things go back to normal? Maybe Dave?
Yeah, I'll start just by saying it's a real opportunity to shift the way that you work with the people that you work with. Any time of massive change like this is a really interesting point of leverage to examine. Why are we working the way that we are? How is it working? And what do we want to make better? I am in a company that had a policy that nobody could be remote for more than 2 days a month. And then now, after like 2 days of deliberation, they decided 2 weeks ago that everybody would be remote. And it's working fine. Like, it's difficult, it's challenging, it's hard, but it really gets you to wonder, what assumptions were they holding about whether or not we could function in a remote manner, and why were we doing that? So I've been reflecting on that and thinking about, given the evidence that we've seen now, there's no way this policy will remain the same when we come back. So what are the points of evidence that we've seen about what's working, what's not, and what we would like to recommend on the other side? I don't have the answer to that yet, but I guess I just want to raise that anybody who has undergone this big shift can identify the important pieces of that experience and can figure out what they want to recommend going forward. And it's also the perfect time to say, let's treat this as an experiment. Let's try doing something in this way for a week or two, and go from there to help get to the shape where you want it to be.
Yeah, I think that you know, working remotely requires a lot of trust from leadership that your workforce is going to do their jobs and do their jobs efficiently and effectively from their homes. And I think a lot of companies have strict don't work from home policies or like only work from home when you absolutely need to policies because there's a mindset of if we let people work from home they're not going to be productive. I don't think that's the only reason, but I think that's a big part of it. And I've heard from friends at various companies that the transition to work from home has been a little kind of off-putting, and they've had comments from leadership that they'll repeatedly say like this isn't a vacation, and don't think about putting your sweatpants on, just like stuff like that makes it obvious that leadership is not really trusting them that they're going to actually be doing their best working from home. So Dave put it well that this is definitely an experiment for a lot of companies. I think a lot of teams and companies are going to rise to the occasion and form really great remote work practices and see that this is a really great option moving forward, and they wouldn't have realized that earlier. I fear that for a lot of teams and companies, they might go into this with a low level of trust that their team will perform well. And I think that in this climate, like none of us are really performing our best because there's a pandemic and we're stressed out and we're anxious and our children are at home and people are sick and like nobody is as productive as they're supposed to be. So what I hope is that, those people in leadership who are convinced that remote workers aren't as productive as they're supposed to be aren't going to conflate that with people aren't being as productive because there's a pandemic going on and we're all really stressed out. So I feel like it could kind of go one of two ways.
Yeah, that's very appropriate and fair. Austin, how do you feel like things might be different in the post-pandemic era?
Well, I mean, I think what a lot of us are realizing is that the jobs that we thought we needed to be in the office to do can actually be done remote, right? Design reviews with the design team for updates to different products and such have gone fairly smooth through Slack. There is definitely a shift in how we approach that, but overall, I mean, I could definitely see my schedule changing to be more remote than in office.
I keep hitting. There we go. I keep hitting the wrong button to unmute myself. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to open it up to some audience questions. I don't know if you guys are also reviewing that, but there are some questions around maybe some advice in tool sets and methods for bringing people that have no experience in collaborating remotely. How do you bring them on board, and what does that look like beyond over communication? Like what's some like top advice you can give? Maybe Jackie.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question?
It's okay. So people are looking for advice on how to onboard people that are not familiar with remotely collaborating and what types of tools to use in doing that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the trickiest thing for this sudden shift to fully remote is that tools are actually super important to have those identified. And you also have to imagine that new tools come with a learning curve. So I guess my recommendation would be to look at your existing tools that everybody is familiar with, figure out what like remote capabilities with those work best, like whether it be Slack and screen sharing, and they have a drawing functionality, or Google Hangouts. And it really just depends. Like, I would go based off of like what job you're trying to get done, or what action or result you need, and then from there figure out what type of like collaborative communication tool would best fit, because there's so many. I mean, I know that we've, in some of the answers, we've listed a ton of them. And so, I mean, I think it would just be helpful of figuring out what your goal is, having that list of tools, and if you're going to venture into one, just read and make sure that those tools are going to give you what you need, depending on the type of collaboration that you need. So I guess that would be my advice, because we can rename them, but that's how I approach it.
Yeah. Dave, do you have any tips for bringing people on board that aren't used to remotely working?
I don't know if I have any great tips. I think the practices that we've talked about, like setting clear expectations and communication, open lines of it are key. I do, I guess, just like personally try to invite people and push them to speak more and participate more when they're new to it, so that they can get past that uncomfortable situation first. But everybody reacts a little bit differently, and it's a bit of a learning process. So I don't have a good super tip.
I would throw in, be willing to do a little bit of hand holding. I mean, I think we've all experienced that when you're trying to get anybody to use a new tool, whether it's remote or in person, there's a learning curve, some bigger than others. So things like, sending them a tool that's not populated at all, or I'll use Trello, for example, because that's what I design and that's what I use. If you send somebody a completely blank Trello board, it's not going to be as effective for them to learn if I send them one that's actually populated. Or if I'm trying to get someone to use Mural, maybe I will set up a meeting with them and bring them into a Mural that I'm currently using and have them jump in and brainstorm with me. So, if you're trying to onboard people to tools and practices, I would say show, don't tell, and that will help people more quickly see the value and be able to adapt and use those tools more quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something that has been discussed already is that there's a need for over communication, over collaboration, and things that might, like, you have to expect that things are going to take maybe not twice as long, but they will take longer because you're having this asynchronicity, and there's more gates involved, and there's more ways that we have to work. It's not impossible, and in some ways it's better, but communication is key in setting those expectations and meeting people where they're at, right? And I think all of those are really good points. So we have 5 minutes. If anyone experienced some lag in what's happening, we will be sending out a video of this, a recording of this conversation. I want to just leave it open forum to the panelists. If there's anything else they want to add, maybe a funny story, something to lighten the mood, who knows? But we have 5 minutes, so it's a free for all. You can all talk over.
Yeah,
no, go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add one last thing to that question, which was, being in an agency, we have our internal communications and then our external with our clients, and how things have shifted somewhat internally, right, is instead of having these meetings where we do large scale reviews and we have 10 or 20 different pages or views of a mobile app for us to review, we've started to break it down to, like, let's review this one small segment first, this one screen, this one function, talk in depth about that and then move on to the next. Trying just to break things down into bite-sized pieces. And then for clients, and we've been doing this for a while now, but typically how we present to them is we'll present, say, a new feature. Again, we try to break things down into small bite-sized chunks for them, present a new feature, and then try to bring the review portion into more familiar tools for them. So maybe we'll set up a email chain, or if they're comfortable with Slack, we'll discuss feedback via Slack instead of on a call, where you don't have to worry about that back and forth etiquette, not being in the same room.
I would say my last little advice tidbit that I really like that we do at Trello. So usually when you're on a big group video call, we say, like, keep your microphones off unless you're talking. And I think there's really good reason for that. My embarrassing story is that we had like a whole company call with like a financial advisor to talk about retirement options, and my mic was off and I like sneezed really loud 2 times and everyone heard me, which was really cool. But during our design critique sessions, one of our rules is keep your microphone on if you can, so that the presenter doesn't feel alone. And, obviously turn off your microphone if like your dogs are barking at the mailman or if you're eating chips or something, but just like having that ambient noise of other people's presence can kind of go a long way. So I would kind of urge you to think about that. Like, again, it's good practice to stay muted for the most part, but maybe there are some meetings where it's okay for everyone to stay unmuted and just like hear the sounds that are around you in the meeting.
I love that. That's a great point. I never thought about that before. Thinking about planning a now virtual conference and how to make speakers feel engaged. I think that's probably a good point. Is there's been the thing like, you're not hearing an applause. There's no feedback. So how do you incorporate that?
Yeah.
Something else to add, Jackie?
No, I think I was just going to touch on because I didn't answer the question about what post-COVID would look like. But I just think in general, for me in my lifetime, I think it's the exciting thing I think that's coming out of this is, well, one, as far as it ties to remote working, I think for many years telecommuting and remote working, like we said, has been this like scientific statistical battle. And so I think this is really going to put it to the test. So I'm excited to see what comes out of that. But for me, the other exciting thing is a lot of businesses, not just product, but a lot of people are becoming very creative in the way that they offer services now. And I think after this is going to be a really exciting time. And I think for me, the most exciting part is that although we are in a pandemic and it's stressful and all of that, this is the first time that I've ever experienced cross country. And it's like the world coming together and working together for like good, right? So like I've never seen so much good being shared and happening, and a lot of it is using technology, and a lot of it is using stuff that we design and all of that. And that's super exciting to me because I've seen like the United States as a country come together during hard times, but this is the first time I'm experiencing like the world offering help, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it is. There's a silver lining. So we're at time, and I want to do just some final housekeeping. Where can people find you if they want to continue the conversation or ask you guys questions, if that's okay? Maybe you can post it in the chat. You can also just give a closing word. We'll start with Austin.
man. So I've actually kind of cut myself off of social media for the year. So, can't really reach me right now. But I am on Twitter at Austin K. Woodall. Yeah, I'm not super active, but if you message me, I'll respond. So
you gotta punt it.
I just pasted my Twitter in the chat, but I would love to chat more in our Indy Design Slack community. Poppy, I don't know if you'll be sharing out that link with the materials that you'll be sending out to, but for anybody who hasn't joined, please come chat with the rest of the Indy Design Slack community. We would love to talk to you.
I will post my Twitter. Yeah, I'm active on Twitter, but mostly right now in like research related topics, although I'm happy to take any remote questions. I guess a closing thought touching on what Jackie and Anna said. Like, we are in a global pandemic. It is a time of stress. So don't forget that, like, yes, we're talking about remote work, but work is one piece of life, and like, don't overdo it right now. Also, if you're remote for the first time and have the trust, experiment with the way that you're working. I can go take an hour and a half walk in the middle of my day, and that's fine with the team. That's fine for me, and it's nice to be able to try those things. So there is a new flexibility too that you shouldn't feel afraid to explore.
I'll second all of that. Feel free to Slack me. Also, if you're just having a hard time and have more questions, I posted my number, so you could text me, you could call me. I'm happy to talk. I'm not super active on Twitter, so I put my Instagram, but I'm here to help if anybody has any questions.
Awesome. Thank you all. Indy IxDA is active on, well, we have all of our accounts. We get them even if we're not super active. Same with me. You can find me, who is Poppy, anywhere. And we will be probably, and Experience Makers is also on the socials as well. And many of you probably found this through our Meetup groups. We'll be using all of those channels, and all of the channels will be blasting out any media that we have. And let's see, next month we'll probably do another remote. Indiana is currently on lockdown status, so we'll probably host another remote. If you guys have any ideas for content, things that you would want to hear us talk about or learn about, please let us know. Do join the Slack channel. And also, if you want to think about Indy Design Week, you totally can as well. So thank you all for your participation, your attention, and there's a lot of good happening right now. So I'm excited to be a part of it with you guys.
Thank you for hosting, Poppy.
Yeah, we can all do like the woo as we like.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.